we got a handle on what they were, and the talk is what we saw in Australia, where we went, the habitats, the type of birds we saw, what some of them were doing, and we'll try and make it interactive.
Good. I learned a lot. I just learned how ignorant I was of Australia just talking to them for a few minutes. And that meeting is November 27th, right here. At that meeting too, Jean Cluley, does anybody know her?
Yes.
It's a her, Jean, not John.
Yeah.
Jean Cluley is going to be here, and she's going to talk for just a few minutes about the Doug Melanson Park in Yarmouth that has just been established, and they're putting up bird nesting boxes, and they would like our advice on the bird boxes. That'll just be a few minutes at the next meeting. I also want to announce that TREPA, the Tusket River Environmental Protection Association, is showing a movie on November 14th in this room at 7 p.m. It's called Burned, and John Solos, the director of TREPA, could you say a word about
The what of TREPA? Something like that. So-called executive director, voluntary employee. It's a movie about the use of biomass to generate electricity. It's basically based on the U.S. experience from what I can figure out, but I think it's going to be interesting and give us maybe some thoughts about how far we're going down this road in Nova Scotia and have we gone too far and all the rest of it. There's been a lot of debate about biomass, so I think it'll be quite informative. So November 14th at 7 o'clock here, if nothing breaks or unties.
Good, thank you, John. So I'll move now to our main event. And we have two speakers, Alix and Nick Knutson. Did I say that right, Nick?
Close enough? Yeah.
So we're going to talk about you're going to talk about roseate terns, an endangered species. And I'll just give you a brief introduction to our two speakers. The first speaker will be Alix, and Alix is born and raised in West Pubnico and studied Geomatics Engineering at UNB. He's been birding seriously since 2012, which is really a very short time considering his level of expertise. Then that followed a 4-year work term in Australia. He has also spent time during his teen years working with Teddy Dion. Teddy Dion on roseate terns and northern gannets. He spends as much time as he can birding the islands of southwest Nova Scotia. I should say he spends as much time as he can birding, period. And then, but especially on the islands of southwest Nova Scotia, especially the underbirded Tusket Islands. He is editor of Nova Scotia Birds, the Nova Scotia Bird Society quarterly journal. He has done colonial seabird surveys for Environment Canada and Université Sainte-Anne, as well as other bird-related contract work. He volunteers for the Nova Scotia Nature Trust, the Breeding Bird Surveys, Nocturnal Owl Surveys, and the Christmas Bird Counts, and you're actually leading the Christmas Bird Counts now, taking over from Eric Barr. So, Nick, I'll introduce you now too. So, Nick is born and raised in Clare, lives in New Edinburgh. He has studied at University of Sainte-Anne, at the University of Ottawa, where he obtained a law degree, and he is now a master's student in biology at Acadia University. His supervisors are Mark Mallory and Sean Craig, who's here as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to you two guys for the evening.
Thank you very much, John. So, terns are generally smaller than gulls, and most show a black cap during breeding season. Most feed exclusively on small fish captured by plunge diving, often from a hover. All species nest colonially at the water's edge, usually on islands. In Nova Scotia, 12 species of tern have been recorded, and they are sooty, bridled, least, gull-billed, Caspian, black, roseate, common, Arctic, Forster's, royal, and sandwich. The three photos that you see here are of a royal tern at left, middle is a gull-billed, and at right is a Forster's tern. And these were all photographed on Cape Sable Island in July of 2014, when many birds were caught in the eye of post-tropical storm Arthur. The four species that breed in Nova Scotia are black, common, Arctic, and roseate. And the black terns only breed in large marshes at the border with New Brunswick. So here we have our three breeding species of terns here in southwest Nova Scotia. Especially when you're at colonies, this is the view that you get of the terns above you. So being able to identify them from this perspective is quite important. One of the things that can be quite obvious, especially if you've got strong light from above, is the translucence in the primaries. So this here is a common tern, where the inner primaries are more translucent than the outers and the secondaries. At right here we have an Arctic tern, which shows all of the primaries are translucent. And then here we have the roseate tern here. Another few things, the Arctic tern at right here has a narrower trailing edge to the primaries, which covers more of a greater number of primaries. And then the common tern here has a wider trailing edge that covers fewer primaries. And similar with the roseate. The roseate is the palest below. It really almost glows in some light conditions. The common tern here is slightly darker below, and then the Arctic is again darker still. Tail length varies between the three species, common having the shortest tail, and then Arctic longer, and then roseate even longer. So here again we have the same three tern species, but standing. Bill differences are quite important. The common tern here, top left, has an orangey red bill with a black tip. Arctic at right here has a shorter bill that's more pure red. And then the roseate has an entirely black bill, especially earlier during the breeding season. Again, you can see tail length, so the tail slightly shorter than the primary tips, and Arctic tern about the same or slightly longer, and then roseate, you can see how that tail extends quite far past the primary tips. Leg length, the commons have long legs, similar to the roseates, and the Arctics have little tiny legs. The roseate, again, you can see how white they are underneath, so there's not much contrast between the cheek and the undersides. The common has a fairly large white cheek, contrasting with the gray undersides, and the Arctic has just a smaller cheek patch, white cheek patch. So the common tern nests in freshwater or saltwater, usually on islands, but also on sandy beaches or vegetated dunes. The breeding range covers much of Canada except the north and far west. It breeds around the Great Lakes and along the U.S. Atlantic coast south to South Carolina. It spends its winters along the coasts of Central and South America. This map that you're seeing here is a breeding evidence map from the second Maritime Breeding Bird Atlas. And I've got a copy of that atlas behind, so if after that you want to have a look at that, it's there for your viewing. The map has three different colors, three different colored blocks, and the red blocks represent places with confirmed breeding, orange is for probable, and yellow is for possible. And the common tern is the most common tern that we get in Nova Scotia. The Arctic tern nests on small rocky islands or coastal beaches. Their preferred nesting habitat and access to feeding grounds, usually in deeper water, means that they are more strictly coastal than common tern, and you can see that if we go back to the common tern map here, that there's some breeding inland around Lake Rossignol and Keji. And if you compare that to the Arctic, it is strictly coastal. There's one block there. The breeding range in North America is from Alaska east to Newfoundland and along the Atlantic coast south to Massachusetts. It winters around Antarctica. Actually, the Arctic tern has the longest regular migration of any bird species. Arctic terns breeding in Greenland and Iceland were tracked by GPS in 2010 and were found to cover about 70,000 kilometers in an average year. And one bird in the Netherlands was tracked traveling 91,000 kilometers during 1 year. So the roseate tern, it requires co-nesting Arctic tern and common tern and prefers to breed on small, rocky coastal islands. Therefore, breeding sites are linked to large, stable, mixed tern colonies with no nesting gulls. It hides its nest under dense grasses, boulders, or washed up debris, or in the case of managed colonies, like the one near Pubnico, in man-made nesting boxes. The breeding range in North America is from coastal Quebec, south to New York, and on the Florida Keys, and it winters coastally off South America. It is listed as endangered nationally under the Species at Risk Act in 2003, but was designated as endangered by COSUWIC, the Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in 1999. Endangered species is one that is facing imminent extinction or extirpation in the case of the roseates here. They were designated as endangered because there are fewer than 250 mature individuals in Canada. It is also listed as endangered provincially under the Nova Scotia Endangered Species Act in the year 2000. And 99% of the Canadian roseate tern population now nests in Nova Scotia. Records do show that roseates have bred on Noddy Island, one of the mud islands, Little Bald, one of the outer balds, Holmes in the Tusket, and Chesapeake Island in Pubnico Harbour. But they were first noted breeding on the brothers in 1982 when 55 to 60 pairs nested with several hundred Arctic and common terns. The brothers, seen here in this aerial photo, are known locally as les Îles Verts, and they are about 600 meters west of Lower West Pubnico. So this is Pond Road going east-west. So this is the western shore of Lower West Pubnico, and this is North Brother, and this is South Brother. This would be Comoes Hill or the Tusket Islands area here. Now, Ted, who's in here with us, has been monitoring and managing the tern colony since 1983 in cooperation with the Canadian Wildlife Service and the Department of Natural Resources. The islands have been owned by the province since 1990 and have been a DNR wildlife management area since 2007. Access to the islands from April 1st to August 31st is not permitted without written authorization. The terns stopped nesting on the smaller South Brother in 2004, so all of the recent work has been on North Brother. Here is a map of Lobster Bay showing the location of North Brother Island, which is right there. So this is the Pubnico Peninsula, West Pubnico. Here we have Wedgeport. This is Comoes Hill, Pinckney's Point. This is Chabot Point, and then Yarmouth Harbour here. So these are the Tusket Islands. Here we've got Gannet Rock, where gannets nested until the 1880s. And here we have Green Island, where we've got razorbills, puffins, black guillemots, and a few common murres. So here is a list of some of the monitoring and management efforts that were undertaken at the Brothers. And this is a photo of Ted holding an adult roseate tern. So examples of work. Ted has a website. It's www.ted.ca, and that has years and years of data on it. So if you are interested in any of this work, you can go there and have a look. So he's been keeping track of arrival dates, doing nest counts every year, banding and band observation, blood collection, GPS tracking. I know Sean was involved in prey species identification. Erosion is being tracked, and sometimes it's quite surprising. I know I was there one year, and a section of the island lost 75 centimeters during the winter. So it's shrinking very, very quickly. In terms of management, there's a lot of work that goes on North Brother before the terns arrive in May. So cleaning up washed up debris, creation of a management zone with landscape fabric and beach gravel, and construction and the placement of nesting shelters, and then destruction of gull nests. So here we have a photo. A lot of these photos are Ted's, by the way. He allowed me to use them. This is the management zone on North Brother, where landscape fabric is used to keep down the vegetation and then covered with beach gravel. So these are the nesting shelters here, all numbered. So there the shelters have been placed. This is a photo from April 28th, 2017, so just before the terns start arriving. And we see 50 nesting shelters here with rocks to hold them down. And this is the management zone. And then there are another 75 nesting shelters further north in an unmanaged section of the island. These two decoys, Ted? This is an aerial photo of North Brother. North is up from July 23rd, 2016. And this shows the management zone here. And then the rest of the nesting shelters are on this area. Arctic terns usually nest around here with less vegetation. The longest dimension of the island is about 300, it's supposed to be feet, 300 feet, Ted, I think? Kind of this way, from about north to south. So one of the monitoring efforts was to place GPS receivers, tiny GPS receivers, on adult roseate terns during the chick feeding stage. And 12 adults were tagged in June of 2016. So yeah, so the unit and then the antenna behind there. This photo is by Ronnie D'Entremont. I thought this was quite interesting. This is a compilation image of the tracks from all of these 7 recovered adult roseates that were tagged by GPS. And so North Brother would be somewhere there. So you can see that the primary foraging area is from North Brother down to, this is John's Island here, so back and forth. They do cross the Pubnico Peninsula to go into the Pubnico Harbour to feed, and then some do go north towards Abbott's Harbour. So here we have a bar graph showing roseate tern nest numbers on the Brothers from 1991 to 2016. The maritime population of roseate tern declined by 50% between 2002, at its max here, and 2012. So you see the steep decline there. It's thought that adult predation by mink and owls on the breeding grounds, as well as low juvenile survival and recruitment to the colony, might be contributing to this decline. Roseates in Nova Scotia are highly at risk because of the small number of breeding sites. This is a graph that shows the nest numbers of all 3 tern species on both South and North Brother. So 2 different colors, South Brother in green, North Brother in red. So you see a bit of a variation between years. So if you notice at the end here, 2017, low numbers of terns arrived in May. Then a high tide event caused a lot of damage to the management zone and the nesting shelters. Then there was a nest count of all 3 tern species in June of 2017, and that resulted in 165 nests compared to the 661 the previous year. Then after that, the eggs began disappearing, and trail cameras caught a family of 4 crows stealing eggs. And this was the first time in 35 years where there would be no breeding success at all on the Brothers. So following the abandonment of North Brother in 2017, during June, later that month, DNR flew a helicopter along the coast from Yarmouth to Lockport in search of the missing birds. 3 groups of terns were identified by Pam Mills of DNR. There were 150 individuals in Yarmouth Harbour, 120 in Pubnico Harbour, and 30 at Green Island near Cape Sable. So we did find the colony of terns in Pubnico Harbour. Now the 150 that were in Yarmouth Harbour are sort of interesting because I went and looked afterwards and did not find a single tern, right? So they obviously weren't looking to nest there. Perhaps after the abandonment they decided to skip the breeding year, right? So after this aerial search, I visited the Tusket Islands here, and then I went from Shag Harbour, which is here, to Cape Sable, and did not find any roseates at all, or any of the missing commons and arctics from North Brother. Then on July 3rd of 2017, Calvin D'Entremont and I checked some common eider nesting shelters on Pumpkin Island, then went looking around the area for terns. We followed a common tern that was carrying food from close to Bar Island, which is about here south of Suret's Island, and this bird was going south, and we followed it straight to Gull Island, which is here. So once on Gull Island, I heard the distinctive call of a roseate tern, and noted that the colony of terns in general had grown significantly since the previous year. And during that visit, I counted 7 roseate terns. I went to get Ted, and later on that day we went with a crew, and we counted 233 nests of all 3 tern species and noted even more adult roseates. The year before, in 2016, there were only 10 tern nests on Gull Island. So the extra individuals, the difference from 233, were some of the birds from North Brother. By the end of the season, 17 roseate tern nests were found on Gull Island. So here we have an eBird map of the roseate sightings in Lobster Bay during 2018. For those that don't know, eBird is an online database of bird observations that anyone can sign up and submit. And then you can search, you can use the database for queries and stats, and maps like this. So the islands with roseates at tern colonies have the island name in yellow. During the abandonment year, the year prior to this, in 2017, roseates were only found on Gull Island. But in 2018, there were many more roseates, and they were spread out. So we have Pinch Gut, which is just off of Wedgeport. I had 2 adults there that seemed to be a pair and looked to be sitting on a nest. On Pease's Island, one of the Tusket Islands, we had a max of 6 adults, and later in the season we ended up finding a nest and 1 fledged juvenile. By the end of the season on Gull, there were 37 nests, and Nick will give you a lot more details on that. North Brother, earlier in the year we had a few adults there, but they then decided to leave again, just like the previous year. Then there's an island here off of Shag Harbour and Bear Point, tiny island with a colony of commons, and we had 7 adult roseates there, and they did not appear to be nesting. I didn't see any breeding evidence at all. So I'll go back here actually. Pease's Island here, one of the Tusket Islands. This is a zoomed in view of that island. There's actually a lighthouse right here, and the lightkeeper's building was just burnt to the ground by, I believe, DFO this winter. So it looks a lot different now. The most interesting island, other than Gull Island for roseates, might be Pease's Island. During the nest count at Pease's Island on June 22nd of this year, we found about 70 tern nests on the gravel bar north of the pond, right here. Mostly commons and some arctics. And then we had 43 on the hill to the west of the pond. And those were mostly commons as well. During that visit, there was 1 roseate. I didn't see any breeding evidence then, but most on Pease's were common terns. Then we visited on July 15th, and there appeared to be many more nests on the hill west of the pond, here. And we were able to confirm 5 adult roseates and 1 roseate nest with 2 eggs. So here would be the roseate nest. So the roseate eggs are slightly pointier on the pointy end, and the spotting is more even throughout the egg surface. And you can see there's taller vegetation around the nest because it likes to hide the eggs a bit more than the other species. So this is the fledged roseate on Pease's Island, photo taken on August 12th, 2018. And I am very interested in observing the roseate activities on Pease's Island next year, and I'm hoping to confirm more nests. Thank you very much. Like I said earlier, Ted is here, Sean is here, and Nick. So if there are any specific questions to some of the work that's been going on North Brother over the years, then I'm sure one of us will be able to answer.
Do you want to take questions now?
Sure. Sure, yeah.
The Gull Island, in comparison to the brothers, individual brothers, how big is it?
It's a whole lot bigger. Do you know exactly this?
Bigger, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's a lot taller, and it's got a lot more room, and it definitely won't erode away anytime soon. Right, so it's a good spot to be. It's further from the mainland. It's harder to land. It's harder to get to. So for people, you know, it's harder for people to get there and disturb them. Right.
Harder for me to get there too.
Yeah.
It's not a tree island, it's grass.
There were trees years and years ago,
Yeah.
but there are no trees now because the winter storms last winter moved a whole bunch of beach stones up beach. And I was there this spring, and we were walking around, and the tide was low, and I found a drowned forest there. So there were trees years ago, but there are no trees now. There's a pond in the middle as well. Nick will have a lot of pictures, I'm sure.
Do you notice any similarities between Pisa's, North Brother, and Gull in terms of just the general landscape? Do you see any commonness?
There are no trees on any of those islands. There are gravel beaches, you know, good substrate for nesting on all three, right? I guess Pisa's does have a lot of gulls nesting on there, right? So that's not good. So we'll see how that works out this year. Pisa's is half government owned and half private. The section where the roseate nest was found is privately owned.
Was this movement and establishment of nests from one island to others very surprising or not that surprising, or wasn't it, you know, what degree of...
Yeah, well, I think we were all worried in 2017, the first year of the abandonment, that we only had 17 on Gull, right? And there were about, you know, more than 50 in 2016, right? So where were they all gone, right? So we were very happy that in 2018 that we had found, you know, most of the 55 pair, right, were accounted for, just in different places.
Yeah.
But you know, terns know what they're doing, and if there is an issue where they're nesting, they're going to move, right? So that's a known fact, and you know, it had been 35 years, which is a long time, and I'm sure it was because of the efforts by TED, CWS, and DNR, why it did last that long, right? But unmanaged, you know, a lot of things can happen. So.
Well, because the brothers are kind of erosion's taking over the island, it sounds like that Gull Island will be the major place.
I hope so.
If so, will it get the same protection as the brothers?
I know we've.
See, Gull Island is privately owned, whereas the brothers, well, they were privately owned at one time, but then they became the property of the province. Now, Gull Island is still privately owned. So.
Have you identified the owner?
Yes, that's a...
Most of them, right?
Yeah, so it's multiple.
Yeah.
One for sure, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And one is not local for sure, the one that we've been talking to.
Yeah.
Right. So there is work being done. CWS is looking at that. So hopefully.
Yeah, Alix, I was just curious about the GPS transmitters.
Yeah.
They look sort of big and ungainly on the bird. How much do they weigh?
Does Ted know?
I don't know, just a few grams.
Yeah, so
They're
they
very small.
Yeah.
Yeah, very small.
they can't weigh more than 3% of the body weight. I think these ones were at 2 point something percent.
And they're only left on the birds for a week or so, and some actually fell before the week. We didn't capture all the birds that had the GPS locators. We captured, I think, 8 birds that had them, but only 7 actually had them left on them when we already lost them. So it's actually sutured into the skin. Yeah. but there's only a few little things holding it there, so it's meant to fall off before too long. So they don't go fly south and they get the long down before. And usually the idea was to just leave them for less than a couple of weeks anyway. By around a week or so, I think, or less than a week, we tried to recapture the birds. They're very difficult to recapture the birds, I assure you. And we were very lucky they were still nesting, and they nested in the nest boxes, and we just put a treadle trap in front of the nest box, and they had chicks or eggs, and they'd come right in and pull us. We didn't capture it's hard on the birds also. It's not something that we do lightly. All these things, there's so much paperwork that they have to go through to do all these things, and it's stuff that had been used on other birds in other areas. It wasn't, we weren't the first ones to use them in birds. It's the only way to get to find out where to get the data of where they were feeding. We thought we knew, we weren't sure. We found out where we thought that's where they were supposed to go.
I forgot to play the sound of the roseate. So you. What's that?
Or something.
Oh no. So yeah, if you're ever at a tern colony or near one, you've got to listen for this. Oh, I put my phone on silent. Quite a bit different than the other terns. Let me see if I can find.
They also have an alarm call, which is a raspy croak almost. That's very different than all the other terns that we have here. So when you're going to a tern colony, you hear that croak sound, you know so it was a tern without even looking.
Here's a common tern. And we have the Arctic. Harsher and higher pitched. I think we've actually got the sound that Ted was referring to. There you go. But that's the sound I heard when I first found them on Gull.
Sorry about the coconut.
Yeah.
Was there any further investigation of the Bear Point sites?
Yes, I went twice this year,
Okay.
and
Trips there, I've seen terns passing over the
Yeah.
causeway quite a bit.
Yeah, they were quite approachable, and you could go with your boat and sit there next to the rocks. And they were just the roseates were all landing in the same spot, and once in a while it looked like, well, we followed one with a fish, and it went down and then it came out without a fish. So I ran over and there was nothing there, right? So it must have just gone there and ate it itself, right? So there was no breeding evidence there. The island is tiny, so it's not a terribly good spot. And then when I did go, I looked, and a lot of the chicks were dead, so I don't think it's a good spot for them to be. A lot of the common tern chicks were dead. It's a hard life. Nothing else? Nick? I'll close mine here. If I can find my mouse. Oh, is it? Yeah. Oh, here I am looking down, yeah. There you go. I survived.
You used to giving a presentation like this?
Oh, hold on. I haven't told you that we're recording this.
Oh, okay. It has not.
For posterity.
It has not been a super long time that I've been studying birds, but it's really a great honor to be here presenting to you guys. I certainly have a great respect for the birding population in the southwest of the province, and I'm very proud that there's now a chapter here, and it's really nice for me to get to present here. So my presentation is more focused on the habitat selection study that I'm doing on Gull Island as part of my master's project, but it's going to touch on a lot of the same kind of themes that Alix was talking about as well. So the table of contents I was going to go through is the importance of Gull Island for the roseate tern colony that we have. I'm going to talk a little bit about habitat selection studies, so the kind of study that I'm doing and just how we do them. And then give you guys a little bit of an idea about some of the results that we've gotten so far this year, which are interesting, a little kind of surprise or a comment about the research we did this year, and then a little bit of time for questions as well. Can anyone hear me all right? It's a pretty small room, I think we're... So, like as Alix was saying, in both 2017 and 2018, roseate terns have nested on Gull Island. In 2017, really in response to kind of getting kicked off of North Brother Island, and it was in fact Alix who found them again, and Ted, as usual, was in the perfect spot to have like the ultimate picture for describing to people when Alix found the terns again, is like the picture of Alix on Gull Island taking a picture of the roseates he's finding again. So if you ever need pictures, if you're ever studying roseate terns and you need 1 million pictures that go perfectly with your project, TED.ca really is the unbeatable source for that kind of stuff. So I think it was mentioned, but roseate terns, especially the ones we have here, they always nest in larger colonies of common and Arctic terns, and that has been the case on Gull Island in both 2017 and 2018. So they do this mainly the roseates do this mainly to take advantage of anti-predator mobbing behavior by the commons in the Arctics. And another great action shot here from Ted's website of a great blackback on Gull Island who looks like he's got his eye on a tasty roseate chick or something and is just taking off. And then another image that just goes to demonstrate the aggressiveness of a common tern, where we have a common tern being aggressive towards a roseate. So even though the roseates take advantage of the aggression of the commons in the Arctics for their own protection, especially on a really tightly condensed colony like we see on Gull, there is a bit of give and take there, because it's not just a great thing for the roseates to be so close to these aggressive common terns all the time. So one of the things that roseate terns do when they're in these larger colonies is they form these smaller subcolonies. So one idea is maybe in the inner edge of the subcolony there's less aggression from the outside terns. But we saw it both in 2017, so this is a map of the 2017 roseate tern nests that we had, where we have, again, kind of that north and south subcolony, so that's what we ended up calling it, the north and the south. And then again, this year in 2018, which is the button for the laser pointer?
Right in the middle.
Yeah. And we have some pictures too, but there's a big vegetation patch here. So both in 2017 and in 2018, the whole colony gets kind of split up into like a southern section and a northern section. But there's always these little sub-colonies of roseate terns. And this here is the map of the roseate, common, and Arctic terns for 2018. So we see that even the common in the Arctic aren't really nesting in that really, really dense patch of vegetation there.
Do you have GPS coordinates for every nest of all three species?
So we did one count during the nesting season, and that was not the count that we dropped the GPS pins at, because it was just another step to be doing. So we did our first count with Ted, and I think we got 200 or 318 nests. Then we noticed that the number went down before we did our GPS sweep and drop of pins, and then the population went back up when we did it. So I think we ended up with just under 300 nests, I think. But there was a bit of fluctuation during that time, and a lot of
They're all GPS.
yeah, and they were all GPS though. when we did our sweep. And a lot of those changes that were happening were in this area here. Blue, we'll see later, blue is the Arctic terns, and this little pocket here right in the southwest corner really had a lot of predation. And so that's where a lot of the fluctuation in the numbers was coming from, was this really intense, because you can see how many nests there are. There was a lot of nesting there, but there was a lot of predation as well. And that also makes me think, of course, anytime, if you can think of the question right till the end, then you're welcome to do that, but you're also welcome to let me know and ask a question while I'm going. So we have the 3 species all nesting together on Gull Island, and this is a good picture I find, because honestly you can see almost all of Gull Island in this picture, so it gives you a bit of a context for how big it is. In this picture we're kind of standing right here at the edge, looking straight north over this pond, which is kind of here, and there's a super vegetated side on the edge here, and then on the left is more the rocky edge where the terns tend to nest.
So how long from one end to the other?
So this scale here, we lost a bit of resolution, but that's 500 meters. So I think the island is roughly 500 meters long by about 200 wide. So it's quite small, even though it is, like we were saying, it's much larger than North Brother, but still, relatively speaking, pretty small island. So this angle here, we would be kind of midway in the pond, looking south this time, towards this really thick vegetative patch that splits up the 2 colonies, kind of right about here. And in this picture, we're kind of in the vegetated section looking east, where there's a little radio tower there as well. The same tower we saw that gull making its graceful launch off of earlier. So we have this colony of terns. They're all on Gull Island, and what was really interesting for my study was the fact that they were naturally selecting their nest sites. So we didn't have any boxes down for 2017 and 2018. So we were really seeing the different species of terns choosing a habitat that they would normally select. And this is a roseate nest here from 2017. And already you can see, I mean, it's maybe not apparent if you don't spend your summers staring at tern nests, but there is a fair bit of cover here already offered. It's almost as if there's like a little bit of a mini rock wall built around, and the roseate has actually tucked itself right in there. And that we'll talk about the kind of lateral cover again in a second as well. I talk about results.
That debris of the grass, was that just washed up, or the birds don't put that there, right?
Well, we had, and it was something that I had kind of gone into this field season 2018 thinking was that I was going to be able to use the type of nest we were finding as a better indicator by going with, if there was a lot of vegetation put in a place with not much cover, it was probably a common. If there was nothing at all, it was probably an Arctic. And if there was a bit of vegetation but a lot of cover, a roseate. But I found, especially this year, because I was looking for it, those rules didn't really hold true. And there was a lot of times where even, especially between the common and the Arctic nests where there was like a really visible bowl that was built out of grass, and we thought like, no way that's an Arctic, it's definitely a common. And then when we would sit there and watch the parents land on their nest and really confirm it, it would turn out to be an Arctic. Or vice versa, we would think it was an Arctic nest because there was nothing there. It was just eggs plopped down on the beach, and when we'd confirm it, it would be a common. So this one, the spikiness of the chick can confirm to us that it's a roseate, but really the cover, I guess, but I am pretty wary at using grass as an identifier, especially after this year, because it was so much, one of the things I was counting on as a new birder to help distinguish these 3 similar looking birds. And
Is it not useful at all, or does it still hold true for the majority of cases?
Well, I'd say it still holds true in the majority of cases. You just can't put.
You can't 100% rely on it.
Yeah, and as it's something and I'm sure you guys have all learned, is there are certain rules you can follow when you're identifying certain birds, but you always have to kind of keep an open mind as well, and not just blindly go with one thing that you saw.
Do you have the stats? Like what percentage of common terns don't build a nest?
No, because the other thing that we were thinking about that, but the other thing that would then make that difficult is in the cases where it is right on the edge, how much vegetation means now there's a nest bowl. Because then there are certain nests where there's like 4 pieces of seaweed, so is that enough for a nest bowl? Or is the line at like 10 pieces of seaweed, or is it at 15? And so like it is interesting, and I suppose we do have that data because we have an overhead photo of the nest. But that particular variable was difficult to get after. And we know from other studies, as you said as well, that they do prefer to nest on like a cobbly kind of gravel substrate. So a lot of the research we were doing wasn't to kind of confirm if yes or no they like to nest on cobbly style of substrate. It was really to look at them nesting naturally and then go from there and see what we could tell. But so we had this big colony. They were naturally choosing their nests. And then, like I said, when we counted with TED, we had a total of 318 birds, both common, roseate, and arctics. And that was a great opportunity to study the roseate tern, even though it came from a place of sadness, because 2017 was an upsetting year. But 2 of the key recovery objectives in the species at risk document that we have are to establish 1 more colony of at least 15 pairs and reduce threats to roseate tern habitat. So it stands to reason to reduce threats to roseate tern habitat. We have to first understand roseate tern habitat really well. So in that way, it was a really great thing to be able to do a habitat selection study. But also, if we're going to establish another colony, it means encouraging them to nest in a certain area. And especially after 2017, we really don't want to encourage them to nest in a place that we know will not be a good place for them. So both of these key objectives really tie in with the fact that we had this great opportunity in 2017 and 2018 in particular to study the roseates in an unmanaged environment in this mixed colony with common and Arctic terns. And so that really is the opportunity that was passed on to me. So it was also an opportunity for me to team up with Sean, who really loves this slide in particular, and my other director, who could not be here but is here in spirit, Mark Mallory, who encouraged me to become a master student with these questions. And some of the questions that they're making me think about is how do, so we have Gull Island, this year we had over 50 gull nests, great black-backed gulls. You can see they arrive first. They really colonize this whole wide vegetated area. Then we have these over 300 terns that arrive and really densely colonize this edge here. So how do all of these birds in a natural substrate share that environment? So that's really one of the main questions that I've been pushed to try to answer. And when they do choose a certain place on that island, how does the selection of a certain nest site influence the production of that nest or those birds? So habitat selection studies, it's come up a few times here. Yeah, but really that's how I like when someone says, what are you doing for your master's? That really is what I'm doing. It's doing a habitat selection study for roseate, common, and Arctic terns in an unmanaged mixed colony. And one of the reasons I frame it that way is because it's the first time that will have been studied. So you get that little star for it's the first. And if you're a publication-driven person, it's a really great thing to be able to say it's the first of anything. But also it helps kind of compress what it is I'm doing. So a habitat selection study obviously involves the selection of habitat. And what is